This call is being recorded.
Welcome everyone to the California Microsoft 365 user group. This is our United California group, Los Angeles, Orange County, Sacramento, San Diego, and hopefully others around those areas that are following our social feeds and whatnot. We're going to have a really good talk today from Chris Bortlik around Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex. Before we get to Chris, I just want to have a few announcements, talk about some upcoming events, some speakers that we're lining up for the group. Then we'll make it to Chris. I won't take long because Chris has some exciting content for today. And we want to get to that as quickly as possible. Real quick, we want to say thank you to Crush Networks. Crush sponsors the Meetup site that we all use to post our meetings and share comments and whatnot. So thank you, Crush Networks, for that sponsorship. Also, we want to make sure that everybody's aware of the Nazareth Orphanage in Tecate, Mexico. This is one of the organizations that we've supported for a number of years now. We did just receive an update that the orphanage is doing well from a hardware perspective. Really, people haven't been able to travel to the orphanage to understand the exact state of affairs regarding the hardware, but last communications with them, hardware is good, everything is working well. So if you'd like to contribute financially, if that's something that you're able to do, please do so via the link in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. As soon as we can get down there to the orphanage, we will, and we'll provide an update accordingly. On to technical announcements, we've been stating this in each of our meetings, but wanted to share that SharePoint 2010 support has been extended through April 13th. Those are the products affected by that announcement. So SharePoint Foundation 2010, SharePoint Server 2010, and Project Server 2010. As I hope all of you are aware, SharePoint 2010 workflows in Microsoft 365 are being retired. So November 1st is right around the corner, everyone. If you haven't migrated your workflows and you're not one of the companies with an exception, there are some exceptions out there, some extensions up to that date, then please act fast. If you need any assistance with that, please contact other members of the group, throw it out there in chat. There's lots of us that are helping organizations overcome these challenges. Keep in mind that SharePoint 2013 workflows remain supported, but they will be deprecated. So right now, it's very much SharePoint 2010 related, but if you have SharePoint 2013 workflows out there, please do look to re-platform those as well. No better time than now, right? Upcoming events, the Power Platform Community Conference is tomorrow. It begins at 6 a.m. Pacific. You can sign up for that at aka.ms/popcc. It's in 9 hours. There's some pretty good topics there as well. So please do check out that community conference. We will have our next meeting in November. We're trying to confirm Mark Cashman. I believe we have confirmed the date. We're just discussing the topic. So it should be an exciting month. That'll conclude our meetings for the 2020 calendar year, since December and Christmas and the holiday season is right after this meeting. So we'll communicate out through the meetup group the date and the topic of that session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Chris. Chris is going to be talking about Project Cortex, SharePoint Syntex, and what you need to do to get ready to take advantage of these great technologies. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Awesome. Thanks for the invitation to speak here today. I appreciate you all joining. I know things are a bit crazy right now with COVID and everything. Folks that don't know me yet, my name's Chris Bortlik. I'm one of the architects at the Microsoft Technology Center here in Boston, Mass. I'm also the father of 4 daughters who you may see or hear at some point throughout today, as well as my wife's here. So a few of you got to meet her earlier when she was trying to print something in the office. So I just got to get that out there in advance. Galen, I just want to confirm you can see my screen okay? My video's coming through all right?
Loud and clear, can see you perfectly. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, my kids also like to play video games and stuff, and occasionally we'll get that low bandwidth message on Teams. So just wanted to make sure that you all could hear and see me great. So yeah, so I know many of us have been doing Teams, and we're used to this kind of new normal, if you would, over the last 7 months. I think Joel was talking before we started. We've seen significant adoption of Microsoft Teams. Certainly, COVID has accelerated some of that usage and adoption. But again, we're a small enough group today, so feel free to ask questions throughout the session, whether you want to unmute yourself, whether you want to raise your hand in the Teams meeting. Just so you know, my setup, I have a monitor in front of me here, which is what my camera is facing. I have a second monitor, which is where I'm watching video in the chat and all that. So if you do feel comfortable going on video, it always makes it easier for me as a session lead and facilitator to kind of see if folks are still there. But again, certainly feel free to ask questions if you need to as well. So yeah, 2020, it's been an interesting year. We were all talking before things started about a number of our travel plans and work changes and other things that have happened due to COVID. At Microsoft, as folks, I'm sure remember and know, our mission remains the same, which is really to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more, and really appreciate what this user group's doing. I wasn't aware of some of the charitable work that you're all doing, which I think is just fantastic. And certainly I know, Joel, what you and others in the community have been doing over the last 20 years or so, and really appreciate everything you're doing, not just for Microsoft, but for the broader world and broader community. It's kind of interesting launching a brand new product like Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex during a pandemic. And really, part of what we're trying to address with Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex being the first release is what Joel talked about at the outset, really around all the work we've been doing over the last 5, 6, 7 years, getting content from on-premises up into what was BPOS at the time, now Office 365 and Microsoft 365. So really, content is at its core with Project Cortex. But now that we get the content into Office 365, into SharePoint Online, we're really focusing more and more around the user experiences that are built on top of Office 365. More and more you hear about Microsoft talking about things around the Microsoft Graph being used to connect people and content and experiences. But now that we have that content and we have those experiences, really the holy grail for the 20 years that SharePoint's been around has really been about identifying and curating knowledge and content and helping people to find the content to be more productive and really to get insights from that information. So you've seen a lot of investment over the years around not just migrating content from on-premises to online, not just building new meeting experiences through things like Microsoft Teams, but actually helping us to get richer insights out of that information and get better insights into who's working with who and how we're sharing content, all built on top of the Microsoft Graph as well. So Project Cortex really helps us to do 2 things, we hope. One is continue to help organizations to be more agile and nimble, as well as to continue to build resilience. I think it was, I don't know if it was, just looking here, I think it might have been Paul or one of the other folks at the beginning of the session was talking about how, businesses have changed due to, working from home, how things are changing based on leveraging teams from home. And I think that, even after this is done and this pandemic will end at some point, and hopefully we'll go back to being in person again and having user groups and meetups and SharePoint Saturdays and SharePoint Conference and all the other great community events and Microsoft and partner events we've had. But there is still going to be a significant portion of folks that may be working from home more than they have in the past, or working from home on a permanent basis. This pandemic's really opened our eyes to what could happen if there's a major disruption. So really helping organizations to learn from this, to all be more resilient for the next time something happens. And hopefully it's not as severe as this pandemic we're going through, but just realizing that we really need to be more agile as businesses, as well as build the resiliency into our organizations. So the mission of Project Cortex is really around connecting people with knowledge and experts and insights. So we talked before about how content services really is SharePoint, and you think about SharePoint being the content services layer for all of Microsoft 365, whether it's Teams being built on top of a group that's built on top of a SharePoint site, OneDrive for Business being leveraging SharePoint, even services like Yammer are now leveraging groups and leveraging SharePoint for the content services layer. As we're getting content in there, whether it's documents or chats or other information, being able to mine that information for knowledge and discovery, but also then leveraging things inside of tools like Yammer to identify topics that are being asked as questions and which of all of the responses is the best response. So we can then identify expertise and answer common questions. And then leveraging workplace insights to get visibility into things around work-life balance. You've seen Jared Spataro publish a number of different blog posts around some of the anonymous telemetry that we're seeing. And more folks are not just being more productive because of the fact that they don't necessarily have to commute and sit in the car, but there's also a very real risk of burnout because people are starting work earlier. They are connected to work later. They don't have some of that time to recharge between meetings because you're not walking from one building to another or one room to another. So really gleaning some of that insight to help us hopefully achieve work-life balance. Again, and not just get overloaded and overworked and burned out by the fact that we're all working online and are connected much more than in the past. So what we've been hearing from customers, and again, I've been at Microsoft for almost 13 years. I've been in the SharePoint space since around 2001. Fun fact, I was actually a Microsoft customer for 14 years before I joined Microsoft around 13 years ago. And a person that you might know, Chris McNulty, he and I actually were peers working at John Hancock in the US, actually owning the SharePoint environment back in the day. So I've been a customer of SharePoint for a long time. I've been working with the product for many, many years at Microsoft. And what my customers tell me in my role at the Technology Center, where I work with large global enterprise customers, is really that a lot of our customers are still seeing disconnected silos. Certainly more and more customers are embracing Office 365, but we still have on-premises file servers. We have legacy systems like Documentum. We might be using third-party cloud services like Box and Dropbox. So even though more and more content is being moved into Office 365, there still are some disconnected information silos that are out there. Customers are still having challenges around managing and applying a consistent taxonomy and applying metadata. Oftentimes, it's because it's very labor-intensive and manual to interpret data and apply metadata to it. And organizations are still struggling with compliance and records management and retention. So what Project Cortex and Microsoft 365 as a whole has really been seeking to do is help customers get understanding around the content that's in the environment. Really, the first release of SharePoint Syntex is focused around content processing and continue to help customers with content governance, whether it's tagging content for findability and discovery, whether it's tagging content for security reasons, or tagging content for records management and compliance reasons as well. And we commissioned a study with Forrester back in the summer, so around July of 2020. And there's some tangible business impact that we believe, and Forrester believes as well, solutions like Project Cortex can help with. First off is the cost around content classification and curation, being able to save a composite organization anywhere from $1 to $3 million, improving the ability to discover content, which has really been one of the promises of knowledge management solutions like SharePoint and even search solutions like Microsoft Search to find content and people. And then over time, hopefully helping customers to reduce legacy content services and tools and the work that goes into managing and maintaining things. Galen was just talking about some of the legacy services like SharePoint 2010 and even some of the legacy workflow services. So helping customers over time to not have to maintain as many legacy solutions as well. So at Microsoft Ignite, which was a virtual event a few weeks back, we announced Microsoft SharePoint Syntex, which is the first release of the Project Cortex brand. SharePoint Syntex became generally available on October 1st and is available now to customers worldwide, at least enterprise commercial customers that are out there. The focus of SharePoint Syntex and what is generally available right now really focuses on three key areas. Number one is focused around content understanding, enabling folks to build no-code AI models that can do things like classify and extract information from standardized documents. So in this example, a purchase order, which is very well structured, and leveraging some components that have existed in Office 365, in Azure, in the Power Platform for a bit, like AI Builder in this case, where we can actually provide some sample documents, train an AI model, and actually map to standard fields. So in this case, identify that this looks like a date field or a purchase order. This might be the requisitioner, et cetera. And as new documents get uploaded to a document library, enable us to automatically extract metadata. Another great use case for this is something I'm working closely with partners like Fujitsu, where maybe we can digitize content that might be a paper document that's getting scanned in or faxed, where there's other sorts of documents that are being ingested into the service, and not just digitize that content, but actually be able to, put that in as an image or a PDF and be able to extract metadata. So that metadata can then be promoted as columns in SharePoint that we can then use workflow and other solutions to actually provide some business process automation as well. A second common challenge, though, is we might have documents that are not as well structured as a purchase order. Take, for example, contracts or legal documents, statement of work documents that I'm sure Joel and Galen and others that have been in professional services for a while, you see a lot of documents that are created by legal departments that may not be as well structured. So how do we go through and enable someone that's not a data scientist to actually build complex models that enable us to extract information and metadata from unstructured documents as well? And then once we have those documents ingested, how do we leverage that information to apply tagging to improve security and governance through Microsoft Information Protection as well? So I'm going to pause for a second, see if there's any questions so far. Oh, all right. Out of curiosity, maybe just do a show of hands in Teams. How many of you have already gotten experience with SharePoint Syntex? Maybe have turned it on in a trial environment or even in a production environment? Anyone playing with Syntex? Yeah. I know, Joel, you had mentioned at the outset, I think you were playing around with it. Galen, you're as well. Great.
Yeah, I definitely have. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, part of what we're trying to address here with SharePoint Syntex and Project Cortex, if you think about artificial intelligence, and I've been in the IT industry for around 25 years. My undergrad was in computer science, and I remember back in the 90s when I was in getting my bachelor's, a lot of the AI was focused on this traditional kind of black box AI, where we needed large amounts of data, large training sets to actually train these AI models. And the challenge with traditional AI is, first off, having the ability to collect this large amount of content, and then having an AI expert or someone going through and identifying the patterns and doing some tagging, and really at the end of all the processing, having an expert actually QA the model. One of the benefits of the cloud, things like Azure and Office 365, is we now have large amounts of data. We have large amounts of compute and storage as well. So what we're moving towards as an industry is really moving from this traditional black box AI to this idea around machine teaching and more of a human-centric AI, where in this model, we can upload a small sample of documents. So in the AI Builder example I was showing earlier, taking 5 to 10 documents as an example, enable a human to go in and review some of the recommendations that the AI has come up with. And then over time, do reinforcement learning and reinforcement teaching to continue to have the model and the AI system continue to learn as well as new content comes in. The analogy I like to use a lot with this machine teaching is, as I mentioned, I have 4 daughters, and I think about how my daughters have learned and continue to learn. So my daughters now are in high school, middle school, and twins in elementary. And I think back to when they were first learning to crawl and then walk and then run, and are now doing very complex things with dance and gymnastics and doing things in school. Right? We start by training them what's good and what's bad, and there's some failing that happens, and we reinforce the positive behavior and try to, encourage them not to do the negative behavior as well. And same sort of thing with these AI models, where we want to continue to train and reinforce the positive examples where the AI model has gotten it right, but give some examples as well and give some teaching and coaching of what might be a negative example as well. So if you look at artificial intelligence and Microsoft's perspective on AI, and Brad Smith, our chief legal officer and president, we really talk about the idea around ethical AI and it being not machines or people. It's really people plus machines, people plus AI. So if you think about what's available to us from a content management, certainly we still have the ability for humans to do manual tagging and classifying of content, whether it's being using the managed metadata service, whether it's using content types. So we still have that ability for humans to manually go through, still can do things around folder-based metadata defaults and other things. But what we're trying to move into is this idea where we can have some sort of automation around it. So one area we're doing a lot, just in Microsoft in general, is around object detection. And if you look at the work we've done in Azure with things like not just doing speech to text, but actually doing image recognition, optical character recognition, where we can identify things inside of images, where we can scan in a receipt or bring in a business card, or things that we're doing inside a stream where we can identify images and speakers and things like that. So really having the ability to build on top of the models that Azure has been perfecting over the last few years and all the work that Microsoft Research has been doing over the last 20 to 30 years to help us actually identify common objects in images. From a content perspective, having the ability to, again, do work around forms and form processing, whether it's structured documents like purchase orders, or again, those unstructured documents. I mentioned contracts. I mentioned resumes. Another really good use case that I've seen is a customer of ours that actually leases cell phone towers. And one of the challenges that they've had is they have tons of legal documents that specify the terms and conditions of a lease. It might be the terms of the lease, how many years is it for, what are the payment terms, what's the dollar amount. And the big challenge they had is they have all these legal documents that really someone hasn't gone through and tagged them properly with metadata. So they're having a hard time getting visibility into which contracts are greater than $1 million, which contracts have an expiration date coming up, anything that they could do to kind of reason over that. So having the ability to actually crack open those documents in an intelligent way and extract those metadata attributes and promote them as columns has huge business value for basic things like sorting and filtering and workflow as well. So as you look at SharePoint Syntex, there's really a couple of key concepts that we're going to drill into here. First off is this idea around document understanding. There's a new site template called a content center, which an administrator can provision. And the idea with the content center is we're building a model, and I'll walk you through an example of a model. But really, again, these models are being used for unstructured file formats, Word documents, things like a contract or a statement of work or things like that. We're going to build these trainable classifiers where we can leverage entity extraction, and we can leverage that same topic, if you would, or that same model and apply it across multiple document libraries. And when we're training these, we can do it with really just 5 or 10 different documents, PDFs, Office documents, email files, etc. And we're going to provide it with a number of positive examples of things that match the model, as well as negative examples to say, if you find documents that look like this is a good example of a document that matches the model, whereas these documents might be ones that aren't applicable to that model. From a structured document perspective, you're going to see some examples where we could take, the most common example, this purchase order. And in this case, we're going to leverage the document library and some integration we've built directly with AI Builder, very similar to the integration you've seen with Power Apps and Power Automate, where we can really go ahead and build a model that's connected to a specific document library. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and train it again with a PDF, images like a JPEG or a PNG. And again, we're going to provide 5 to 10 different examples, and the AI is going to give us some recommendations of fields we may want to promote. And then as new documents get uploaded, whether they're manually uploaded or they're ingested through a scanner like Fujitsu or other partners, we can go ahead and automatically extract that metadata from the documents that are attached to that library, which is attached to that form processing model. So as I mentioned, all of this work that SharePoint Syntex and Project Cortex is doing is really built on the back of the last 20 years worth of innovation that's been happening with SharePoint, right? If you think back to, Joel, I think you're involved in the early days of SharePoint and Project Tahoe, as well as the early days of BPOS, our online services. You think about the significant investments and improvements that we've made over the years in terms of scalability. In Office 365, you think about the size of the site collections we can have now. You think about the size of the files we can support. You think about the ability to have over 300 different file types that can be analyzed, as well as having built-in browser-based viewers for things like, AutoCAD, or DICOM images for X-ray images and things like that. You think about, again, how document libraries is really powering anything built on Office 365 groups, or now Microsoft 365 groups, which includes experiences like Microsoft Teams and Yammer. You think about, again, how OneDrive is being built on top of SharePoint as well, the evolution of what was the My Site, if you remember back in 2003 and later. You think about all the work that we've done over the years around version management and metadata and policy enforcement, and other things we've been doing over the years around, approval workflows and document sets, et cetera. So Project Cortex, SharePoint Syntex is really built on the back of all of the investments we've been making over the last 20 years in SharePoint on premises and the last 7 or 8 years in BPOS and Office 365. We've also invested a lot recently around improving the metadata experience. So if you remember the early days of SharePoint Online, the managed metadata service, the term store, the Admin Center really hadn't got a lot of love over the past few years. Recently, the product teams rolled out some improvements in a modern content services. So a new way of managing enterprise content types, a new way of managing the enterprise term store. And really the goal is to promote content types in term sets, not just as a SharePoint construct, but making them consistent and available across all of Microsoft 365. Integrating that with Microsoft Search. You think about all the investments we made with Microsoft Search to have a consistent search experience so that when I'm searching in Outlook or Teams or Yammer or SharePoint, I don't have different search experiences. Finally, unifying the ability as a user for me to search from that unified search box and have the ability to find across anything in Microsoft 365. Not having to worry about, did I post that in Yammer, or was that in Teams, was that in email? Let me go ahead and search in one place and find everything across the system. Having a consistent ability to tag content, and again, over time, continuing to improve the ability to publish and discover content types with a unified taxonomy service. So part of the investments here has been the ability for us to build these taxonomy extractors, the ability to start to map things between things that we're extracting against managed terms and term sets, getting rich visibility and reporting through term store reports, very similar to the work we've been doing around Azure Information Protection and Microsoft Information Protection to understand where terms are being used and where they're not being leveraged, so you get visibility into the usage and adoption of your terms. Having the ability for us to improve the content type syndication hubs and the process that's work, modernizing it to support things like hub sites in SharePoint so that we can now push and scope a content type to a hub site and then have it sent out to its associated sites. Because as folks know, we're no longer recommending leveraging subsites. So we really don't want to have this older model where you had a root site collection and you had all the subsites embedded under it. In a modern world where we have multiple sites that are all top-level site collections, and then we're relating them via hub sites, it's really important that we can scope content types to apply to a hub as well as its member associated sites as well. And also having the ability to work with industry standard file formats like SKOS, where we can actually purchase and leverage industry standard term sets. So if there's folks like Larry that works with customers in financial services, healthcare customers, et cetera, where you want to purchase industry term sets and import them in, making it easier to do that as well. Joel, I see your hand up. You have a question?
Yes. While you're on this slide, I wanted to just ask you a very question about this particular.
Joel, you're breaking up.
Yeah, I thought it might be me.
Slide.
Yeah. Joel, I think we lost your audio. Folks can still hear me okay, right?
I'll put the question in the.
Yeah, I hear you,
Q&A.
Chris.
Gotcha. Joel just cut out.
No worries. Yeah, Joel, if you want to throw it in the chat, I'll take a peek at it. Just make sure that I'm actually in the meeting chat. Oh, interesting.
I was going to ask you to call out the SharePoint syntax stuff on this particular slide.
Oh, to call out what's specific to syntax from the slide?
Yeah, if there's any, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a breakdown yet of what is specific to syntax versus what is just part of the term store improvements overall. You're right, we are making investments specifically in Microsoft Search as well as in the the content types, as well as in the managed metadata services and in the term store that do not require syntax. Some of the things that I know are going to be syntax specific are the ability for us to go ahead and do some of the machine learning to extract content and then match some of the extraction to the managed terms as an example. But a lot of these things are going to be just base services that are being added to the content services foundation as well.
Thanks.
Yep. So these are some of the newer experiences that rolled out from a content type gallery in a term store perspective, even before we released Cortex and SharePoint Syntex on October 1st. So this is a view of the modern term store. One of the things I really like from a user experience perspective is, again, modernizing and inside of modern sites, the ability for people to select and apply metadata, especially when there's some hierarchy to the metadata as well. So we focused, again, not just on improving the admin experience, but also making it easier for users to apply, search, and filter based on the new term store and term set gallery as well. As well as this is some of the improvements we've made around some of the analytics and reporting. So in this case, getting a really nice dashboard view around the usage of different terms in the term store, open versus closed, as well as, again, some of the work we're going to be doing around publishing content types to make them available via hub sites as well. Another big announcement that we made, this happened around the build time frame, so back in kind of May or so, is we did go into preview with some of the taxonomy graph APIs. So knowing that there are a lot of developers on the line, as well as partners, whether they're systems integrators like Joel or ISVs that are building tools, migration tools, et cetera, there's often a desire to enrich content programmatically. So there are some preview APIs available through the Microsoft Graph for taxonomy as well, and taxonomy services. And last I checked, which was about 2 weeks ago, these Graph API endpoints were still in preview, at least last time I checked a couple weeks ago. So this is a bit of a logical architecture around Project Cortex. So as I mentioned, Project Cortex is really built on top of a lot of the experiences that exist in Microsoft 365 today. Certainly services like SharePoint, Teams, Yammer, Outlook, even the Office clients themselves, whether it's the Outlook client or Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you're going to see more integration with Project Cortex. One of the other good examples is Microsoft Search being integrated directly into the Office clients as well. The first release of SharePoint Syntex is really focused around this idea around the Content Center. There are some other releases coming later this year that I'll talk about in a bit when I get to the roadmap that are focused around topic cards and topic pages and a new topic center template. But for now, SharePoint Syntex is really focused around this Content Center. Well, Project Cortex is built on top of, as I mentioned before, the Microsoft Graph and a lot of the artificial intelligence capabilities that have been available inside of Azure and inside of the Power Platform for a bit, things like AI Builder. And while Project Cortex initially is focused around content that's part of Microsoft 365, over time you'll see more and more investment on information that we're bringing in through the content connectors through the graph and things that we're bringing into Microsoft 365 through the content connectors as well as through Microsoft Search. So Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Search, as folks probably know, again, Microsoft Search is the unification of bringing together the search experiences that have existed for a while, not just across Office 365, but tight integration with Bing, as well as native Windows search. Beauty of this is not just bringing back search results for documents and pages in SharePoint, but also bringing in conversations from Yammer, from Teams, from Outlook emails as well. And as I mentioned, Microsoft Search is built on top of the Microsoft Graph, and there are already a number of pre-built Microsoft connectors for things like integration with ServiceNow, on-premises file servers, and there's a whole host of connectors that are available through Microsoft partners like BA Insight and Raytheon and others that have already built a whole set of connectors that enable you to connect to third-party content services, again, things like OpenText or Documentum or other applications and platforms, Salesforce being another example, where you may want to bring information in, and these connectors enable you not only to crack open the system, but they also know how to index the content there, as well as honoring the access control list as well, which is often a big challenge with connecting to external content sources, is knowing how to open up the content source, knowing how to crack open the documents and the content in there, but also knowing how to honor the access control lists and the services as well. And as I mentioned, SharePoint Syntex is really integrating with what we're doing from a content services perspective for compliance. So typically, as I mentioned, when people are tagging content, it's typically for at least one of three reasons. Reason number one that I often see is tagging content for retention. So as an example, maybe I have a document that's being labeled and classified as an HR document. Maybe Larry's onboarding to the company, and there's an HR document that specifies his employment contract or his benefits, what have you. We want to retain content based on a certain age, when it was created or modified, or some sort of event, some disposition review. The second reason why I often want to tag and label content is for sensitivity. So imagine that I have a document, and that document contains PHI or PCI. It has information that's governed by HIPAA. And we want to tag that content for data loss prevention reasons. We want to also maybe label the content and apply an encryption policy that might restrict sharing, or maybe it drives conditional access or limited access, which says, you know what, you're trying to access a content or a site that's been labeled as highly confidential. Maybe you're on a device that's not trusted. Maybe we're going to deny your access to that site if you're on a non-trusted device. Or maybe we're going to give you browser-only access based on that. So, often tagging content, not just for compliance and retention, but also for security and sensitivity reasons. The third reason is really what Project Cortex is really primarily focused on, is around tagging content for knowledge management, reuse, and discovery. Now, again, certainly these labels can be applied manually by users, but we can also start to apply content automatically through these AI models. And we also can get analytics and insights into the utilization of these labels as well. So out of curiosity, how many of you are leveraging Microsoft Information Protection today? Folks are familiar with MIP. If you want to just kind of raise your hand or let me know. Kaylin is great. Joel, awesome. Great. Yeah, so Microsoft Information Protection, let me kind of pause for a second here. And I usually have a Visio diagram that I've made up, or do a bit of a whiteboard here, but Microsoft Information Protection is the unification of a number of services we've had over the years at Microsoft. You think back in the early days of Office 365, we had different DLP engines for Exchange and SharePoint, and we unified them into one set of data loss prevention, sensitive information types that all of Office 365 leverages. Around the same time, Microsoft had its rights management service for encrypting documents and emails, and we acquired a company called Secure Islands, which enabled us to go ahead and provide labels to documents, either manual label or automatically labeling and classifying based on the existence of certain sensitive types or patterns or certain keywords. That then became what's known as Azure Information Protection. Well, Microsoft also went out around the same time, and we purchased a Cloud App Security broker that had its own way of dealing with information classification protection. And oh, by the way, we're also doing things on the endpoint with Windows Information Protection. All of those data loss prevention, information protection assets, about 2 years ago, started to come together under one umbrella, now known as Microsoft Information Protection. That Microsoft Information Protection has extended beyond just what has existed in the cloud to also apply to the endpoint that we call endpoint data loss prevention as well. So the beautiful thing with this is we now have one way of defining a standard sensitive information type that could be, again, based on certain things like a credit card number or social security number. We can build our own sensitive information types based on regular expressions. We can do exact data matching. I mention all that because we're finally getting to the point where we have one standard way of defining what is a sensitive piece of content, what is a particular definition of a sensitive piece of content or a label. We can now leverage that same information type and apply it for data classification for security reasons or for compliance reasons. We can also extend that into the work that we're doing in Project Cortex as well, which really helps us with information governance, as well as doing things around auditing and e-discovery as well. So the business value of all this, what we believe, is, again, having a standard way of defining sensitivity labels and retention labels, having things like Project Cortex to go ahead and train and classify and identify content based on taxonomy and the content types, being able to actually marry that together, which can improve our overall governance of applying retention policies, security and compliance policies, processing content, which we also think will help with knowledge reuse and knowledge discovery as well. So I'm going to go through a couple of kind of just click through demos just for sake of time, but I also have a live environment we can break into later on, but just really focused around the content processing scenario first. So this is an example of the Content Center template, which again is a new site template that's available once you enable Project Cortex in SharePoint Syntex in your environment. The way that this works is it's built upon this idea around creating different types of models. As I mentioned, if you create a model through the Content Center, this model can be reused across multiple sites across your organization. The way that this is done is once a document gets uploaded, whether it's in this case bringing in some PDFs or some images or Word documents, as the documents get uploaded into those libraries, a workflow can kick off and actually process it against the model and start to extract some of the metadata. You know, what's the title of the document, certainly, what type of file is it, as well as any other sort of custom metadata we're going to extract. Now, to build this model, we're building what's known as a classifier. This classifier has this idea around building different sorts of entity extractors as well. So a lot of familiar, consistent kind of terminology, if you're ever used to building entity extractors inside of SharePoint Search and Fast Search. If you've done any work in the past with things in Azure, like Lewis for building kind of intents, very similar model and process for building these extractors. The way that this works is we're looking at documents that we've brought in, and then we're going through and we're looking for certain keywords. So in this case, we might be looking for what an agreement might look like. So in this case, this looks like it's a services agreement, and we're looking for it based on a certain set of phrases. When we're building this phrase list, we can look for things around certain keywords, and we can use Boolean operators like ands and ors. We can specify whether it's case sensitive or not. And basically looking for that gives us a delimiter that we can know to look for things that are appearing before that word, right? So whenever we see the word agreement, we can look for what was directly before that and potentially extract that as a piece of metadata. So whenever we see the word agreement, we can identify, well, what type of agreement is it? In this case, this looks like a services agreement. Once we go ahead and we define that classifier, in this case, the contracts classifier, we can then go through and point that at a library. Inside of that library, we might have a bunch of documents that we've uploaded as samples. Once these documents are in there, we can go through and do some training on this. So as these documents come in, we can then go ahead and actually process it. And then once those documents are done, we can actually see that information promoted as metadata. So this might be a good place for me to break out and show you one of my examples that I've actually built out in my environment. So in this case, I've got a content center. In this content center, if you notice here, has the ability to define multiple models, as well as different training files, as well as the actual files that we want to process. So in this case, I've actually built this model that's looking for benefits changes. And if I drill into this model itself, you're going to see here that I've already uploaded a bunch of sample documents, some that are examples of positive examples where these actually are HR benefits, as well as other documents that might not be examples, in this case, statement of works. And you can see that I've gone ahead and built out these entity extractors to look for maybe who is this addressed to, what's the discount percentage, and things like that. So now that I've got these documents uploaded and I've got these models, these entities that are there, I can drill in and look at this. And in this case, I can actually see some of the training that's been done. So you notice that for these first 5 documents, it's gone out and it's extracted what it looks like is a discount percentage. So if you look at this document, it's highlighted the number 5 and promoted the number 5 as a label, because in this case, it's appearing right before the word discount and before the percent sign. And if I actually were to flip through these different documents, here's another one that's 5%. Here's another one that's 12%. But if I look at this benefits change document, you notice that this doesn't look like that document. And in this case, it's a benefits document, but in this case, I haven't actually gone ahead and identified, because in this case, maybe there's an extra space between the 10 and the percent sign. Or in this case, it's a document that really isn't a benefits document. It's actually a statement of work in this case. So what you do again is you build these classifiers, and then you go through and you train it with a whole set of documents. So in this case, again, I'm looking for certain words. I'm looking for, in this case, this % sign, and I'm looking for the proximity. So I'm looking for that's between A and the % sign in this case as well. Is there a question or comment there?
Looks like we lost your screen share. I'm not sure.
Oh.
What happened.
Did
Nope,
everyone?
I got it. It's just fine.
Okay.
Maybe just for me.
Larry or Eric or anyone
Yeah,
else?
I've got it too. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So yeah. So again, in this case here, again, it's looking for the word A. It's looking for this % as a delimiter, and it's basically finding the proximity. So things that are between the A and the %. And this is how it's actually doing some of this intelligence to actually go through and extract the information. And again, as you go through the training, you're going to give it positive examples and potentially negative examples as well. And then once that model exists, it can then be applied and reused across multiple document libraries across the organization. And you can see in this case, the model is pretty much around 100% accurate, or thinks that it's 100% accurate as far as it having enough content to be trained as well. So again, very similar to if you think about what we're doing with data loss prevention and building sensitive information types, where there's this idea around a confidence level, where we can basically go through and train it and then try to identify, well, how confident do we think we're going to be that we can accurately predict the right result. If I go back over here for a second and pop over to the models, again, in this case, you can see my classifier model. And again, if I pop back in here, I'll give you another example around the data change, just to kind of compare this to another one. And if I go through and look at the training here, in this case, it's looking for a pattern, and it's looking for things that look like dates. And again, it understands what a date is and that it's a numeric data type. And again, you can see it understands the different types of formats that might exist for dates as well. But it knows that a date, in this case, really isn't going to have any letters. In this case, it's looking for numeric dates. So in this case, month, day, year. Make sense? All right. So again, basically, once that classifier gets created, gets attached and made available to different libraries, and then as these documents get uploaded, workflow kicks off, rips through the documents, identifies, in this case, the company, the value, the type of contract, services, promotes those as fields, as columns inside of the library. And then, of course, those columns are just metadata that's attached to the documents in the library, which can be viewed and edited. And then the beauty of this all is, again, it can then be automated through Power Automate, formerly Microsoft Flow, to have business process and business rules, whether it's, once a new document gets uploaded, and if it's greater than $100,000 and it's of type consulting, maybe there's a workflow that kicks off that requires some sort of review and approval. Again, that would have been nearly impossible in the past, though, if all I had was this document without being able to easily promote the metadata. Galen? Galen, if you're speaking, you might be on mute.
Thank you. I may be jumping ahead, but since it's extracting these values and promoting them as columns, if you've already defined, say, content types with site columns that are of type managed metadata, what are you going to get to that? Or I may be jumping ahead, so if I am, please forgive me. But can you talk to that?
Yeah, it's honestly something that I haven't had a chance to experiment with it myself. We've already defined, these content types. So it's something that I haven't had experience with yet. I don't know if Joel or someone else has. It's not an area that I've played around with yet.
Okay.
I did notice that you can create a content type and associate it with a managed metadata.
Yeah, have you seen any sort of relationship between existing content types and these Cortex classifiers or models yet? I haven't looked for it yet myself.
I haven't run into it yet, but it seems like when you're doing it, when you're creating a content center, you can create a content type,
Yep.
And then you can apply those models on existing libraries.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know that in the next example I'm going to walk through around forms processing. I know that when I was building one, even today, just testing some stuff out, the first question it asked me is, do you want to create a new content type, or do you want to relate this to an existing one? So I have done it with the more structured kind of AI builder. I haven't yet done it with the content center, but it sounds like it's possible based on Joel's testing.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Joel. So the second example is around the more structured. So the first one I just showed you is more around the unstructured documents, right? Having a statement of work, some sort of services contract, a legal document that are very unstructured. This next example really shines well in a case where you have a very structured form. So the classic example I like to use is purchase orders. And this works really great for purchase orders that you might initiate. I had a customer that wanted to do some work with AI Builder a while ago, and the problem they were trying to solve was where they were being invoiced by their suppliers who had their own different formats. And again, this isn't a good example for cases where you don't have a lot of control over the structure of the form. But for forms that you control and manage, your purchase orders, your invoices, your HR employee forms, again, things that are very tightly controlled, the second example works really, really well. So in this case, I have a document library under maybe the finance site. And the document library might be looking for purchase orders. So in this case, I go ahead and click in the ribbon. And it's a little bit different now that it's gone GA, but similar process. We go into clicking the AI Builder node or the Automate node. I think AI Builder shows up under that now. When I do that, it actually launches me out into the Power Apps AI Builder Model Builder. And again, this interface has changed a little bit since things went GA, but the basic concept and premise is the same. We go ahead and we give it a name. Again, in the newer version that I was working through today, it actually asks you if you want to create a new content type or attach it to an existing content type. But when you go ahead and create it, you're asked to give usually 5 to 10 different documents. I think I played around today. I think you can do up to 20 now. I uploaded 12 in my example today. Once you go ahead and do that, AI Builder will actually go through and make some recommendations. So these little dotted lines are cases where AI Builder thinks that it might have a piece of information that it can promote and extract as metadata. And as it does it, you'll actually see in this case, it says, hey, you know, I'm about 66% confident that this piece of information is actually a vendor. And the reason why it might think it's a vendor is it sees the close proximity of the label, right? So in this case, it sees a label, it sees the next field under the word under the word vendor, and so well, this must be a vendor. Now, when it does it, it goes through and it can identify a bunch of fields and it can make a bunch of recommendations. You can choose to accept or reject the recommendations. So in this case, it's recommending purchase order, it's recommending the date, the ship to, maybe it got something wrong, you can certainly remove it. You can also go through and make your own fields where basically you can say, hey, you know what, AI Builder, you didn't notice that this is the city or this is the state. I want to go ahead and promote these as metadata as well. So you get a set of recommended pieces of metadata that it thinks that it found. You also have the ability to map and create your own as well. Now, once you do that, you basically will create the model in AI Builder. It then requires you to go through and publish the model. When you publish the model, it automatically goes out and associates it with the SharePoint document library, and it automatically creates a flow in Microsoft Power Automate that's associated to the document library. It also promotes those fields as columns on the document library. So by me creating the AI Builder model and publishing it, it went ahead and promoted and created these columns for date, purchase order, vendor, created a view that's specifically around the purchase orders as well, or in this case, it's attached to the all documents view. And it created a workflow that's associated with this document library with that AI Builder model. What that means is now whenever a new document gets uploaded, the workflow will trigger based on the create event, right? So the flow is monitoring the SharePoint document library, and it's looking for a case wherever new documents get added, and it kicks off the workflow that then will actually get processed through AI Builder. AI Builder rips through all the documents, and then as part of that, it'll actually promote the individual fields as metadata, as columns in the document library. So it goes through and does that, and again, promotes the different fields. And again, just like you saw before, these are columns that you could still view and edit directly inside of SharePoint. And again, the beauty of these fields being promoted as columns is that, again, we can have additional workflows that might run for approval and review and other things based off of the metadata that's been extracted from these purchase orders. So before I go into that, I wanted to show you, again, another quick little example of it. So here is an example that I had done a while back in one of my demo environments inside of Microsoft, where, again, I just actually promoted these columns from a bunch of purchase orders. I'll show you, since we're all friends here, another example I was playing around with earlier today, where, again, I created a new model, and inside of AI Builder, you'll see here that, well, let me just take a step back. Inside of here, if I go into Automate, you'll see that I have this AI Builder, and I can go in and bring up the form processing model, so it knows that I've created a new model that's called purchases that's associated. I can then drill into the model definition inside of AI Builder, which, again, is part of the Power Platform and kind of wired up into the solution. And then I can see the different documents that I've used to actually train the model, but it also gives me the association to show me the Power Automate workflow that's connected. So in this case, it created this workflow. Now, the interesting thing that I was just mentioned to Joel at the start, I actually just found a bug that I've reported to the product team, where for my document library, I actually had a conditional access policy that was enforcing limited access. So the workflow is monitoring that document library whenever a new file gets created. And then what it wants to do is it wants to get the file. And because I actually have a limited access policy on that's restricting access, it actually blocked the flow from running because it was actually trying to download the file into AI Builder to process it. And actually the conditional access policy was actually blocking it. So I've already given feedback to the engineering team that they're looking into to make sure that if you do have a conditional access policy applied, that this usage of flow would actually succeed. So my workaround for now is actually turned off the conditional access policy. So I could actually run it, but again, in the real world, we want to make sure that you can still have a conditional access policy that restricts document download from a non-managed device potentially, but still enable the AI Builder workflow to still run as well. So just wanted to kind of share that with you all. So I want to talk through real quick about kind of the licensing as well as how you can get hands-on with this as well. And Galen, how am I doing for time? I'm looking about 20 minutes or so left. Is that still accurate?
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
20 minutes. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, if you see me looking down, I've got a timer on my Apple Watch. So I'm looking down between that and my daughter's constantly requesting more time on screen time. So I'm trying to flip away their requests as I'm looking at that. So sorry about that. If you see me looking down a lot, I'm getting a lot of requests from my daughters. But yeah, Microsoft SharePoint Syntex. It became generally available on October 1st. It is an add-on to Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. So it is an additional purchase for customers. We do give you 1 million AI Builder monthly credits that are used for the form processing, but there is a minimum of 300 users that you have to have in order to go ahead and actually get the AI Builder credits. And the other thing is that you do get 500 indexed items indexed by per user, kind of as pooled storage. So what that means is if you think about the quota we give you in SharePoint Online gives you a certain amount of document storage. That's basically, there's a tenant amount we give you, and then we give you an additional allocation per user that gets pooled at the tenant level. These AI Builder credits, these content connectors for inside of Power Automate, these are all pooled at the tenant level. Now, what you can do is you can get more access and more information on it at the SharePoint Syntex site. But I wanted to show you real quick is actually how I lit this up in my lab environment if you want to play around with it. So first off is there is a new license that's available in trial. So if I look here in my products, what I did is I actually took a Microsoft 365 trial environment. I went in and I added a trial for SharePoint Syntex, which gave me 25 users for a month. I lit this up on October 1st, right when this became generally available. The other thing that I had to do, this is a temporary thing for now, is I had to add a Power Automate per user trial with robotics process automation, the RPA plan. I needed to do that to get the AI Builder credits because my trial environment only had 25 users, so I didn't meet the 300 user threshold. So the first time I did this, I actually didn't have enough AI Builder credits to even build an AI Builder model in my environment. So first thing I did is I added a SharePoint Syntex trial, assigned that license to my user because it is a user-based license. I then went ahead and added the Power Automate per user trial with robotics process automation. Once I did that, I then was able to go into the setup node, and under setup, there's a new wizard for organizational knowledge. And I went through and I ran through the wizard for automating content understanding. And when I clicked into this, and again, I've already done it, but it walked me through saying, do you want to have forms processing turned on? And do you want to turn it on for all SharePoint libraries, only specific ones? And then for document understanding, do you want to create a content center? What do you want to name the content center? And what's the path you want to give for the content center? Once it did that, it then went ahead and built the content center site for me. So you can see mine was placed at the sites managed path, and I named it content center. That's the site that I was showing you earlier here. This is the actual content center site template that got created when I did this as well. And that's basically
Can I just jump in real quick?
Totally, yeah.
On this one, I did the same thing. In fact, I think I was following Agnes's steps, and I got a 404. And what I noticed was if I so in fact I even used the same name you did, but when I try and go to it, and it was even showing up in the SharePoint Sites admin UI, I could see that the site was there. But it was when I created a new site, then I was able to get to it. So there was kind of a weird thing where you can in the admin UI of the SharePoint admin UI, you can create a content center after you've enabled it.
Oh, neat.
So that was a little weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky that mine worked right out. But here to Joel's point is under the kind of advanced or kind of more, there is a new site template option for content center. So if it happens to fail in the initial provisioning, that's a great tip, Joel.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And again, this is all new. This has only been out for less than 3 weeks. So we're all learning together. So speaking of learning, let me talk about the roadmap and then some of the resources, and then happy to continue to kind of take some questions and share experiences and lessons learned as a group as well. So as I mentioned, SharePoint Syntex is available now as of October 1st, assuming you either purchase the license or add the trials in the way that I was just mentioning. And again, what that's really focused on is the document understanding with AI Builder in the Content Center, as well as some of the advanced capabilities around taxonomy. What's coming soon, and again, I want to be careful here because I love my job and I love the income it provides my wife and 4 kids and I. So I think McNulty shared this publicly. I'll say later this year, there will be another release targeted around we're calling Knowledge. The official product brand and licensing hasn't been disclosed publicly yet, but the Knowledge capabilities is going to be what a lot of folks saw back at Ignite 2019, where we were looking at the topic experiences and the topic cards and the ability to identify certain topics inside of conversations and in Yammer or Teams or Outlook, and the ability to kind of add your topics to your profile and your skills and all that. That's what we're now calling the knowledge experience or the topic experience. That is going to be made available tentatively later this calendar year is the target for that. And again, the official branding, the official dates, the official licensing and all that, excuse me, is not publicly available yet. What's scheduled to come next year will be additional capabilities on top of SharePoint Syntex. So some expanded model types, some additional seeding of taxonomy in there, and then some additional capabilities built on top of the knowledge platform across Microsoft 365. Then other things that are top of mind is starting to look at interconnected experiences. So again, content that's coming in from outside of Office 365 through Microsoft Search and the Microsoft Graph, looking at content assembly, imagining something that's like a proposal builder or a presentation builder, and more automated integration for questions and answers. And again, you look at the investments that we're already making inside of Microsoft Search for searching on Q&A. You look at the investments we're making already in Yammer around question types and designating best answer and best response, and you can kind of telegraph some of the areas we might be investing in around improving question and answer discoverability across the platform as well. So the best practices really to get ready for Cortex and Syntex is certainly, go ahead and start up a trial today if you haven't already. Again, what I did is I just created a Office 365 E3 trial tenant that I added Microsoft 365 E5 as a trial. I added the Syntex trial. I added the Power Automate workflow plus robotic process automation trial to get the AI Builder credits. And then I went ahead and just created the Content Center. There's already some sample documents that are included in the Content Center to help you build your first model, which is what I used to build my first model there. But really, this initial focus is focused around getting content into Microsoft 365. So continue to leverage the work that most of us are already doing around migrating on-premises SharePoint, on-premises file servers, third-party content services, whether using third-party migration tools or leveraging Microsoft's Mover tool or the Fast Track Center, partners like Proficient that can help with migrating as well into Microsoft 365. So certainly, continue to get content into Microsoft 365. For content that's not there, certainly look at, mapping your known sources, consider adding them to Microsoft Search through the 7 or 8 connectors we already have, the 130 different connectors that are available through partners like BA Insight and Raytheon and others to start to bring that information into the Microsoft Graph. Getting to modern sites and modern pages, and reviewing and revisiting and updating or revamping if you have to your taxonomy and managed metadata services as well. So if you already have content types, if you already have a strong taxonomy and term store defined, making sure you're reviewing and validating that as well. Now, the product team has done a great job with putting out a ton of training resources. There were a number of great sessions that were done at Ignite, which was all online and all free and recorded and available on demand. So certainly I encourage you to check out Jeff Teeper's keynote and vision session from Ignite. Chris McNulty and Naomi did a great session or a couple sessions around Project Cortex, and Tina and Roberto talked a bit more around the integration of this with Microsoft Information Management and Information Protection. And there's a whole knowledge track built out on the virtual hub with 30 sessions, including deep dive sessions on Project Cortex, on SharePoint Syntex, on Microsoft Search and other related topics, where you can dive deeper with folks like Sean Squires and CJ and Bill Baer and others that did some deeper dive sessions around knowledge as well. Here's the original blog post announcement if you want to check that out. There is a dedicated Project Cortex page as well as a dedicated SharePoint Syntex page. There's a video that's a quick little vision video on SharePoint Syntex that's out there. There's also some self-paced click-through demos that are available. So if you want to do your own walkthrough and demo to play around with Project Cortex and you don't have the time or the desire to spin up a trial like Joel and I did, you certainly can go ahead and leverage the demo mates that are out there and actually go through kind of a click-through demo of Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex as well. Chris McNulty and the product team also have been continuing to run a series of office hours that have been running monthly. The last one was just done about a week or so ago, which was focused around industry. I think this was focused around financial services. All of the prior sessions going back to March are publicly available, and you can watch those recordings on demand. So there's some really good sessions that were done around the managed metadata service, some of the admin stuff, some of the announcements from Ignite, as well as there's the ability to sign up for announcements as they continue to add new sessions. And the intent is to continue to run these monthly. They're run over Microsoft Live events, so you can leverage the Q&A feature to post questions. Again, the product teams are on there. You can engage with them. And again, they're live broadcast, but they're also recorded and available for you on demand as well. So with that, just want to quickly flash through those sites for you real quick. This is the main Project Cortex site that I was talking about earlier. And as you go down here, you'll see the office hours. You'll see links to some of those Ignite sessions, as well as the ability to go ahead and sign up for information. There's also, again, a ton of videos, case studies from early adopters like McDonald. Again, the demo resources, some white papers. If you're a partner, like Proficient is in Fujitsu and you want to get into the content services partner program, there's the ability to apply for that. There's a ton of other airlifts and boot camps and things like that that are being done to enable our partners to sell and deploy and help customers with Project Cortex. Here's the dedicated, again, SharePoint Syntex site, which talks a lot more about what was just released, including licensing and all that. And as I mentioned, there is the Knowledge Virtual Hub, which is, again, not just focused on Project Cortex, but related experiences like Yammer, Microsoft Search. Again, a whole bunch of deep dive sessions that you can watch to get some additional insight. So with that, I'm right around time, but if it's okay with Galen and Joel and Ryan and Eric, I'm happy to take a few more questions before I turn you back over to your hosts.
Thanks so much, Chris. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, if anybody would like to either put your questions in the chat or just come off mute. I know I've got a couple, but I was going to wait to let some others first.
Quiet group.
You know, maybe it'll help for me to
Wednesday.
get started to ask a question.
Sure.
I was going to ask about that second license. So I did notice that it looked like it was $5 per user per month. And like you, it gave me 25 licenses when I signed up for the trial. I don't know if that's a minimum when you're signing up. That was kind of one curious thing about the license was the $5 per user per month. If I want to have a small group to validate it and it's going to be longer than a month or two, could I have a small group that is licensed and we get a license for it? Do you know if there's tiers on licensing?
Yeah, I know that there are tiers on like the pricing based on your contract and your licensing level and discount level with Microsoft. I know there was different kind of list price and then tier pricing. I don't know honestly if there's a minimum of how many you have to get to even get a license. I mean, I know that there is the 300 user minimum that you need to get the AI Builder credits, but I haven't seen if there's a, if you only need 25 or 10, like what the minimum is to purchase Syntex.
Right. Yeah, and that was the follow-on question was around that RPA AI Builder license. Is that it sounds like it may be an additional one if you have under 300.
Correct. Yeah. So with AI Builder, the interesting thing that you can do. Let me just go back into my right environment here. Let's see. Go back here. So there is the ability to purchase AI Builder capacity above and beyond what's going on with the RPA. So the RPA thing is kind of a little workaround folks figured out to kind of get the trial for free AI Builder credits. We're not expecting you to buy the RPA license unless you want to do the robotic process automation, but you can buy just AI Builder capacity. But that's $500 add-on per month. It looks like just to add 1 million service credits if you are below the 300. Does that make sense, Cheryl?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's $6,000 per year if you don't have the minimum of 300 Syntex licenses. You follow me?
Yeah. The other question was around the extractors. So there's the extractors in the content center, and then there's the AI Builder extractors. Those are two different things.
They are, yeah. And there's some limitation today around. Let me just bring up that slide so they could add a
I have noticed that the content center extractors do seem like there's less to it.
Yeah. So the content center extractors. The nice thing with those we call them the trainable classifiers with those extractors. The nice thing with those is you can build them and then share them across multiple sites and libraries. AI Builder is nice because it gives you that visual kind of wizard to do the mapping. But the limitation with this is, let me grab my pointer here, is that an AI Builder model, informs processing model, is only available to a single library, right? So you get the AI Builder wizard here, but it can only be used for a single library. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Versus building a classifier or an extractor that's attached to a content center. Once we build that, we can then leverage it across multiple libraries, across multiple sites.
That's good clarification.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's confusing, or can be confusing. Cool. Any other questions you had, Joel, or others?
The content that you used, did you find a pack somewhere?
Yeah.
You started to mention the content.
Yeah. So when I went into the content center today, I created the new content center. There was a little wizard that walked me through a tour of how to create a model, and as part of this little tour, it walked me through a little wizard on how to do all this, which was great. What was more important to me was that when I went to the training files tab, the very first time I did it, it showed me a banner that said, do you want some samples? And when I clicked yes, it uploaded this, it created this folder, and it uploaded these, whatever, 15 documents into this folder. And then it also went ahead and automatically built for me this classifier model. Now, the interesting thing that I noticed after is when I built that AI builder model, even though it's attached to a specific library, it did kind of put a stub out, almost like a definition file for the AI builder model. It did kind of stub this out in the content center. But yeah, this classifier and then the training files, I got when I was just in the site. There was a big banner that came up for me this morning that said, do you want some samples? And I said, sure, go for it.
Cool.
Yeah, for the AI builder one that I built here, these purchase orders, I got these as a bunch of PDFs that I got from Sean and folks a couple of months back internally. That these are just some standard Contoso electronics. There were a bunch of like PDFs that I got that I just used to kind of train that as well. I'm not sure if they put those into the product yet, but that's kind of where I source those.
How do you navigate to that part where the models are? Is that
sure.
off of the content center library, or is that how do you navigate to that?
Yeah, so where I got to the model was on the document library. Once it was created under the automate blade or tab rather, I can see my AI builder model, and then when I click into this, I have the ability to manage it in AI builder, which pops me out to AI builder itself, and I can see the related models. And then the nice thing it will show me from here is it will then also show me any of the flows that are attached, which is how I then got to the Microsoft flow that for me, again, is failing because of the conditional access policy. But that's basically how I navigated from the library, took me to AI builder, and then AI builder took me to the flow.
Have you played with any of the metadata, like the new advanced metadata, the new modern?
Not much. I mean, I've gone into the term store. I've gone into the content type gallery. Haven't had a chance to experiment much with that yet.
Okay.
Yeah. But it is nice to have the modern experience.
Yeah. You mentioned the analytics. Have you noticed any the reports popping up yet?
I did. Yeah. So in mine, under reports, under content services, and again, this tenant is just in targeted release for all users, so it should be available in any test tenants that you all might have. And again, this is not really being used, so there's no real reports here, but these are some of those new reports.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, I want to be respectful of time and anything else the folks have, but happy to hang on as long as you all will have me.
Oh, this is great stuff, Chris. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the insights. Joel, if you have more questions, feel free to go ahead. If not, we can wrap up and continue to talk afterwards.
Yeah, I gotta track down that RPA thing because that's what I was missing.
Yeah, the RPA.
It's very helpful to have you share that key insight. Was there a blog that you found that on, or?
I saw it inside of Microsoft. So yeah, and again, I want to show you all just again so you know which is the key one, because it was not obvious to me. So the one that you want to get the AI builder credit is, so basically there are three things that I added to make this work. I added a Microsoft 365 E5 trial. I added a SharePoint Syntex trial. And then to get the AI Builder credits, I added this Power Automate per user with attended robotic process automation, or RPA plan. Those are the three trials that I added to get this to work.
Sweet.
Yeah. And then the blog post that like Agnes and others put out was spot on, but I didn't see that piece in her post. So I was kind of poking around this morning to see if others had documented it. But yeah, the RPA thing was a bit of a needle in a haystack that I actually struggled with a little bit earlier today myself, because I hadn't built a brand new one and wanted to go through it all again before I talk with you all today. And that was the piece I was missing.
Yeah, I got the classification working really well. It was the extractors that I was really struggling with, where the ones that my challenge was just trying to get that the one in the content center to extract what I wanted it to. And I don't know if it was my documents weren't similar enough, or it just wasn't highlighting what I was looking for, but whatever it was, it just wouldn't give it to me. But I bet that this would be so much better.
Yeah, definitely see if there's the training files show up for you. Again, I don't know if that's a relatively new thing that they put in there, but definitely check out the training files in the content center.
I'll look for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So Chris, if you have the Power Automate per user with attended RPA plan, even if you're paying for that, I see, at least in my tenant, that's $40 per user per month list. Does that give you what's required from the AI Builder perspective? Or no?
Yeah, the big thing is I'm going to the Power Platform Admin Center in under resources and capacity.
Got it.
Initially, when I did this under add-ons for AI Builder, I had 0 credits. It told me 0 of 0, and it kept failing over and over and over. And I'm still getting some errors that I've gone over my trial capacity in other places, but this was the key thing, that once I saw this add-on for AI Builder credits was 0, it caused me to go look for something else. And that's when I found out about that other trial, that when you create this trial, it changed this to, what is that, 125,000 credits, which was more than enough for me to build that model out. And then I hit the other problem, which was self-inflicted around the conditional access policy. But that's a different bug that I'm tracking down separately with the PG.
Right.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, the product team's aware of these sorts of challenges with the trials, and they're working with the commerce team and the trials team and all that to smooth some of this over. But given we're less than a month since GA, hitting a couple of bumpy edges with the trials. Cool. All right. Well, I'll go on mute and hang out. And again, I appreciate you all inviting me to join you today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's fantastic. Very good.
Great. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So yeah, big shout out to Chris. Thank you so much. That was super awesome. Lots of nuggets of information that's so very useful. And I think this is definitely one meeting that I'll be going back to watch the recording of. So thank you for all of the insights. As I said before, tomorrow there's the Power Platform Community Conference, everyone. It's free. Feel free to join via the aka.ms/popcc link. Next month, we're looking to have Mark Cashman to continue exploring all the latest updates around Microsoft 365. And with that, we can I'll leave the line open for discussion. Feel free to hang out, talk amongst yourselves, ask questions of Chris for as long as we have them, and thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next month. All right.